Hey folks, Dust here with a little bit different kind of video for CSGO. Instead of talking about teams and players and stats and results and tactics, I want to talk a little bit about the broadcast itself, as we always see tournament organizers competing against one another to raise the bar of production value by adding their own unique flavor to things, whether it be custom graphics or, different segments they like to add to their broadcast. One of the other things that I've been seeing organizers do a lot lately is add custom HUDs to add their own flavor, maybe clean things up. And I think this is kind of a really tricky situation where I think there could be a huge benefit from custom HUDs by adding new information that you don't normally get or making things look better. But you also run the risk of creating a HUD that maybe isn't even better than the default one. Maybe you're missing information the default HUD provides that people want that you've now taken away, and you've actually made it harder for the viewer or harder for the broadcaster. And there's also situations where maybe you make your HUD look too different to where it becomes foreign to people. They don't know where to look for information. And I'll kind of talk you through some of that now by looking at the default HUD and looking at some of the custom HUDs I've been seeing come out. So we'll start with the default HUD. And this is very familiar to everyone, score and round clock up top, team name, team logo, maybe a flag behind the team logo as well, player bars on either side of the screen. And obviously player bars are going to show you if they have armor or not, if they have a kit or not, what utility they have, what gun they have in hand, what gun they might have stored. If they're carrying an M4 or an op here, then they show you what pistol they have stored as their secondary, shows you the health bar. Obviously, these go down as they take damage. Obviously, as they die, this all grays out. If they're dead. Also, during a round, you're going to get a skull with an X and then a number next to it, which tells you how many kills they have within the round. Then, of course, you're going to have the player information here with their name, a picture of them or something like that, some stats about them, all that good stuff. So you know exactly where to look for the mini-map, for the player bars, for money, all that good stuff's there. Also, what happens typically in games is over here to the right of the guns, typically something slides out in between rounds that tells you KDA, tells you about their money and things of that nature as well. So this is what everyone's familiar with. We know where to look for information. We know what to expect. It's overall pretty good, but it definitely could stand to have some additions that make it better, and that's what tournament organizers have been really trying to do. And now we'll take a look at a couple of them, and I'm going to use just a couple of examples from ESL1 Cologne as well as the Face It Minor. I'm not necessarily calling out anyone in particular. I'll just try to say that a lot of this stuff is pretty common amongst all TOs, so I'll just kind of do that as I can, but I just wanted to kind of show a little bit of something here. So the first one is going to be the ESL1 Cologne HUD, where it looks very familiar. Over here you're going to have the team names and their logos. You're going to have the score. Round clock would normally be here, but they actually did something really cool where they have the bomb timer. If the bomb's been planted, it kind of gives you a little bit of a way to see how far the bomb has ticked down, which I think is actually really cool. I don't ever want a definite round timer on the bomb because I want there to still be some suspense on whether they're going to defuse or not, but having some type of general idea on how far the bomb has ticked down, I think is quite nice, especially if for whatever reason you don't have sound, you can't hear the bomb ticking yourself. You can at least kind of understand where it's at. It's also nice to always have a series score here, so you know exactly where you are within a best of 5 or best of 3, how many maps each team's already won. It's good to have that information right at hand as you're watching the broadcast, rather than have to go hunting for it somewhere else. Player bars are virtually the same as default, which I think is good because, again, we know where to look for information. It's familiar to us as a viewer, and it gives us all the information that we really want as far as money, how many kills they have in the round, gun, utility, armor, if they're dead or alive, where their health's at. All that is there. And then obviously what this adds, what a lot of tournament organizers do, is they have a webcam for each player, or they have a picture that they've taken themselves of each player that looks a little bit more professional or what have you. They have some stats about the player. And then sometimes you see team cams above or below the player bar are flashed up at some point as well. A lot of people seem to like that. But by dropping the player bars down, it gives them a little bit more space to flash up custom graphics on either side, whether that wants to be cool stats that they want to throw up there, whether it be sponsor stuff they want to put out there, whatever the case may be. They've cleaned things up. They've given themselves a little bit more space to work with on, custom graphics and whatnot. And overall, this HUD looks better, it looks cleaner, but it doesn't stray so far away from the default HUD that it becomes unfamiliar to us as viewers or broadcasters. And if anything, it adds production value with this bomb timer, with the series score, with the webcams of the players and all that good stuff. Now, my biggest pet peeve about CSGO broadcast, and what happens oftentimes, is that you never get to see KDA of all players. Yes, I can see the KDA of Smooya right now because we're on his perspective, but I can't see anyone else's KDA. And the only times you get to see KDA is either A, if the observer flashes the scoreboard at the beginning of the round or something like that, and you get to see the information at that point. But obviously, depending on how quickly he toggles it off, or she toggles it off, you may not get to see all the information you want to see. Or, over here, usually something flashes out in this area that shows you their KDA and how they're spending money and things like that. This area. The problem is a lot of times, in between rounds, there's crowd shots. And so in crowd shots, you typically miss all this information about what people are buying, their KDA, maybe even some average damage per round stats. You miss all that information. And your only option at that point is to literally go pull up hltv.org and look at a scorebot, which really stinks as a viewer and as a broadcaster to just not have that information on hand and readily available to me. And so I think that's one of the biggest pitfalls of crowd shots and how people use certain HUDs or their lack of using a scoreboard, is that you wind up missing out on vital information that you want. And so we've seen some strides towards fixing this, though, which is what I like, but I think there still could be some improvements. So this graphic I'm showing you here is from ESL1 Cologne. It's during a crowd shot, and what it's doing is it's allowing us to have that crowd shot, which is nice. It gives us an idea for the environment, kind of gets us to feel the atmosphere of the event and the magnitude of the crowd. I think it's definitely a nice aspect of a broadcast. It's definitely cool to have. But again, when you have these crowd shots, you basically miss out on key information. This graphic really helps deal with some of that. Because of this crowd shot, you get to see players' money, what they're buying, because it's live updates. So as they buy guns and utility, it fills this graphic. So you get all the information you want about the economy of a team, what they're buying, what they're going to have going to the next round in general, right? So this is fantastic. It allows us to get that information we would normally miss because of a crowd shot during the crowd shot, and that's great. What's the problem, though? Still never get to see KDA. And that's a huge problem to me. You almost never get to see KDA in a live broadcast day in CSGO. It just doesn't happen because typically the scoreboard doesn't come up, and typically these crowd shots that you're seeing now stop you from ever seeing KDA that flashes up at the beginning of a round. So this graphic tackles a lot of that, but this red box I've highlighted, like, why do I need equipment value and team money? I don't feel like you need this. I never use this information. I always just look at each individual player, what utility they have, what gun they have, how much money they have to spend, and all that good stuff. Like, I don't need equipment value and team money. I think that's just redundant information at that point. What you could be putting inside this red box is KDA, ADR, other vital stats we want to see about each player, or other information that is more important than equipment value and team money. And this is not me calling out ESL1 Cologne in particular by any means, because I think ESL has done really well with a lot of their production stuff for their broadcast. And again, I think this graphic we're seeing in front of us is a step in the right direction as far as tackling the idea of having crowd shots but not missing vital information we want as a viewer or as a broadcaster. I think it could just be improved a little bit. And they're not the only TO that has this problem. Almost every CSGO tournament has this issue of not seeing KDA and stats that we want to see that usually flashes up at the beginning of a round because of crowd shots. So again, I really like what's going on here on this area. I think we could make this area a little bit better by putting up KDA. Now what I'm going to show you next is what Faceit has been running at their minors, which might be the best HUD I've ever seen, and I want to point out why and kind of praise it a little bit. So check out this HUD that Faceit's using at the minors, and we'll probably see them going forward for their major. Really love this. For one, they get a nice timeline up top. I actually really think the timeline can be important to use as a viewer and as a broadcaster, and so having it ready available like this, because the only other way you get it is if the scoreboard gets flashed up, is really nice, and I like this a lot. So hats off to them for having this timeline up here, as well as, again, keeping the common information in the common places. Therefore, it's very familiar. You know exactly where to look for information. But what's this inside the red box I have here? Permanent KDA information that you always have at your disposal. I love this. Again, this is information we normally almost never get due to other things that happen in the broadcast that is now permanently here that I can reference at any point in time that I want to because it's a part of the player bar. This is fantastic. Hats off to Face for doing this. I hope more people do this. I think this is the information that we want from a custom HUD that we don't normally get. This is the coolest add I've ever seen to a player HUD, and I hope we see this become more widespread. Again, you could argue that this gets a little too cluttered because now you have the health bar, the KDA, the utility, the guns. Somewhere around here, you'd also have to have how many kills they have within the round that we're watching. So you could take up a lot of space because of that. So you could argue it gets a little bit too cluttered. I think a cool compromise would just be to have KDA as a part of the crowd shot that we just saw. I actually kind of like having it always there because then I always get to represent at any point in time whenever I want to. I don't have to go to hltv.org and look for it. It's always right there in my face. So I really like that. And again, it doesn't look too far away from default. You still know exactly where to look for the information you want as far as armor, utility, guns, money. You know, you still get the personalization of the player's perspective that you're watching taking place right here. So it's still really nice in that regard. And so there you have it. Just a quick video to talk about CSGO HUDs. What I like, what I don't like, what I think can be done to make them better going forward. A little bit different video from me, talking about a different kind of topic within CSGO, but, the broadcast is important to me as a broadcaster and as a viewer when I'm watching from home, and I like the fact that we're seeing tournament organizers constantly try to raise the bar for production value by adding new segments and new graphics, and now personalizing HUDs to give them their own unique flavor. Again, I think it's kind of worthless if you're going to make a HUD that's worse than the default because you're denying us information we normally get that we want. But if you can add extra information or make things look cleaner, then by all means, as long as you don't stray too far away from what the viewer is used to, I think it's fine to do. I think it's great. I think Facet's HUD that I just showed you for the minors has been the best I've ever seen. We're seeing other companies tackle how they can give us information we want during crowd shots, which is nice, but I think they can still be improved. And so I just kind of wanted to talk about the HUDs because they've been on my mind lately, just randomly as I've been thinking about broadcasts. And so I wanted to share that with you. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe for more content going forward.